Yes, this statement is already proposing a very special reading about philosophy and about architecture, which I'm not ready to accept directly. I mean, my work is trying to combine the two traditions in a way, to find possible ways to think while we see and construct in a way that it's intellectual. So I'm not ready to get to the trouble that you try to put me, I mean, to which tradition I belong. All my work is about not belonging to any, but trying to stay in between them and respect both in a way. This is how it always happened in a way, so I don't think that here I do something very original in a way. I think that it always happened to schematize at the end something that in the beginning is blurred. And there is a kind of decisive moment when you have to, I think that, at one moment I think that I have to put everything to a kind of shape or materialize something, which maybe sometimes is not exactly a pronunciation or an articulation or a kind of crystallization of the whole thinking procedure that, you know, is before this moment. But I think that I do not betray the thought that was before, in a way.
Betray?
I do not betray it. I do not. I think that I think that I'm in the direction of this thinking, but it's very abstract. So it's not a very. As a procedure, it's not so easy to describe because it has a kind of moment that it's not so easily. I cannot explain it exactly how it happens, but it's not like I'm the mystic or I don't know. It's kind of. Okay. It's just that at one moment I push it to be crystallized or. No, at this particular project that you say, I think it was constructed with no exact reference to a kind of thinking procedure, etc. So it came up like something that could be interesting, and I thought that it was related to some thoughts that were lying, in the past. But I think that now that I'm thinking, because you ask, I think that it's related also a bit to my work about the Zizek residence afterwards, because it's again a kind of very strange inhabitation that is in the desert and a bit. But in the observatory, the main concept was that this inhabitant was somehow having a view of a kind of desert. And in Zizek, I changed in the Zizek residence. So it's not so easy to explain. And I don't know if I can recommend a kind of procedure for you also to follow in a way. I'm reading a lot and I'm trying to sketch things, and I think that they communicate sometimes, and I think that this kind of concretization happens at some moment, and I try to explain how. So there is always something like a text that also comes together with the project. What I was trying to suggest, and I think I will speak about it later, maybe more explicitly, but it's that it's a very normal condition of the intellectual to be somehow cut from the society and having a kind of distance. And this distance makes him able to respond in a way to all what is happening in the social sphere. So that's also the idea of Zizek, I think, when he does this kind of statement. But this house is constructed in order to explain that this kind of distance is not possible at this kind of social sphere. So that the intellectual moment of somebody being out of the society in order to think about it is not possible anymore. So it's a kind of contradiction that is based also in the social sphere itself. So even if it's kind of very fancy house, etc., I think that it's also very banal in a way. We have it in our. It's something that we don't understand that we live into. All of us live into Zizek houses, in the houses for doing nothing in a way. But I try to concretize it with the drawing in a way. I don't know. So it's these cameras and the screens, etc. is the abolition of the distance in a way that it's introduced. Abolition, yes, of the distance that is introduced into the house per se. It was done, all these works were done when Athens were a very declined city. And it was very sad to see that the law itself did not function anymore because Greece was in terrible trouble. And the parliament, for instance, could not vote legal laws. So the laws that the parliament was voting were obliged by the lenders, so they were not anymore following the constitution. They were against the Greek constitution. So the parliament was voting laws that were against the Greek constitution. I'm sorry. So I thought that while all this was happening, the internet was a very strong element. Facebook was functioning correctly, everything. So it was much more rigid as a system of rules, the internet, than the law system that was declining so much. It was like as if it was a very old apparatus, the whole legal setting of Greece. So yes, I thought that maybe instead of thinking of a state idea about politics of architecture, the city, etc., we could think about the internet entering this realm, but not in a very in a way that you could expect it to happen now. For instance, all these kind of augmented reality things, or the idea that the market enters the city in a very aggressive manner. I thought that maybe it would be, we could think about a different web that would reform the city. So that was my idea. So, and it's a political statement because it goes against the web as we know it in a way. It's a different web. And there are a lot of questions that follow this. Then I tried to imagine how it would work if the internet was working like this. And this is the series of work that I call the protocol works. The bed and the table are for me two conceptual, say, I don't know how, into conceptual objects that they concretize, they condense a system of understanding the social sphere. And yes, the war between the table and the bed was the war in the house that was between a kind of isolation to and withdrawal. So all my Zizek work, all my work for the house of doing nothing is about the bed, an extended bed, a flying bed, and a dividing bed, a bed that does different kind of things. So it's transformations of the bed. And I think that it's the victory of the bed in this society is that you don't need a lot more than the bed for a house. We can all live in our beds if they're extended enough, So we can work on the bed, we can stay and be amused in the bed. So it's something like a whole world of the bed. And the table is something that we lost in a way. Because I don't mean the table as the desk table that also is introduced in the bed order. Let's say. I speak about the table, the meeting table. The meeting table seems to be less and less important. And yes, I follow this history of the apartment where the living room was important, or the table of dining table. I think that we lose this. It's an obsolete object in our houses. We had the sofas where the TV was, but the TV is already very old. So we now have all our own screens, which are, yes, allowing anybody to see whatever, to follow whatever he's into. But we don't have a protocol really for a common table anymore, that it's not so strong at least. So all my work for the city was also to reintroduce systems of tables, public tables, to inaugurate different ways of understanding, different meanings for the tables, which is also a kind of in between the theater and politics and law, let's say. So it's a kind of theatrical, political, and legislative system of this object. There are some books that I'm trying also to have a distance from. So, for instance, The Fall of the Public Man of Richard Sennett speaks about it in the way you are supposing now. So I think that there is also a kind of problem today, and that maybe we can conclude with this, or if you have any other. I think that the problem is not to say that we have to go back to a community that we lost, because we don't know how to do it anymore. So it's, for me, the problem is how to interpret again this kind of condition that we are into and transform it slowly or in a kind of subtle way to a different community, because now the common is a bit gone, we don't see it so much. So I think that, yes, let's say that my work is a kind of trouble, posing this problem as a kind of problem. I don't know exactly how we can get out of it, but already the protocols are somehow a kind of playful way to check different possibilities of understanding what we know as the norm. In Richard Sennett's idea, what I think is a bit problematic for my reading at least, is that it's a kind of melancholy of losing this past of the community and entering to this individual sphere. But it's something like it's already very old. We think about it as something that we cannot go back. It's like being in a very heavy truck, I say sometimes, and you cannot jump out or make a difference. You have to just slowly turn to a kind of different direction. I don't know. Yes, I think that there is something like a question about individuality and the common, but we have to deal with a new individual and a new community that is already putting different norms about thinking the social sphere. And I think that the norm is, for me, what is the most interesting, not the exception, because we, from the 20th century, we still are in this kind of moment of thinking about the exception as a moment of the artistic moment or the political moment having to do with the exceptional. I think that, yes, what is interesting is to think again about the norm.